When I was around 9, my dad started taking me to militia meetings. About once a month, people would show up and discuss how the country was going downhill and how we needed to prepare for war. The people who met up at these meetings seemed wildly different but unified in the belief that the country was on the brink of ruin. My parents met in the Midwest in the late 1980s. They got to know each other as members of a Christian evangelical group. My mom worked as a therapist. Dad had recently been expelled from college and was getting licensed to be a truck driver. Within a few weeks of dating, my dad set my mom on his lap and asked her to marry him. They held a tiny wedding at a rustic chapel. He persuaded my mom to give up her career after I was born, convincing her that a godly woman's place was in the home. I was born in a small apartment near Milwaukee in the early 90s. My first real memory of the house was when my sister was born. She was tiny and precious. I didn't understand why the midwife left and an ambulance arrived. I didn't know why strange men put tubes down her nose, or why a short week later, we buried her in a small cardboard box. Years later, I was riding in my mother's car. I remember leaves falling and the heavy scent of corn in the air. She said, "Your dad was a different man before your sister died." But I never knew that man. From what my mom says, he felt like my sister dying was a punishment from God for not being righteous enough. Soon after, we moved to a large farmhouse in a secluded rural area. Gently rolling hills and beautiful forest stretched as far as the eye could see, and the smell of plants and fertilizer filled the air. I was homeschooled from a young age and had no idea that kids learned any other way. One day, I asked my mom where the children who got on the yellow buses went. She told me, "The world is an evil, wicked place, and we need to protect you from corruption." My dad continuously got kicked out of churches. He thought none of them believed enough or the right way. We'd get home from the service and he'd sit me and my siblings down and tell us what the preacher was wrong about. Right after my 9th birthday, my dad started taking me to militia meetings. People would talk about how the country was going downhill and how we needed to prepare for war. The guys who met up at these meetings seemed wildly different, but unified in the belief that the country was on the brink of ruin. There was an older biker with tattoos who seemed pretty nice. He was convinced that churches were destroying America because they were making everyone soft. There was a nerdy guy who showed up and gave away bootleg VHS tapes with conspiracy stuff, often featuring a much younger Alex Jones. Some of the guys belong to the Sovereign Citizens, a group that thinks the government is illegitimate, so you don't have to follow any laws. They'd pass out manuals on how to convert weapons to fully automatic or how to construct silencers and bombs. One day, my father said, "It's very important for you to learn how to shoot and know how to defend yourself. The government wants to take our guns away, and we need to be ready when they try." I was just 10 years old. He took me to another part of the state where we'd practice military maneuvers with the guys from the militia. Things like bounding overwatch, patrolling, and survival skills. They'd talk about going down to Texas to detain immigrants. They believed that most of America's problems were caused by brown people crossing the border, and they wanted to go stop them. The time and date we planned on doing this kept getting pushed back. My dad had me carry around a pistol in my fanny pack because he thought Muslims might attack us at any time. We constantly went to protests. We'd protest the LGBTQ community or stand outside mosques and abortion clinics. We once spent an entire day in St. Louis to protest Pope John Paul II. My dad said the Pope was the Antichrist. He also said that all women are evil, while taking care to continually remind my mom that she was the only exception to this rule. Entertainment was wrong. Movies, television, and music were completely banned. Videos that served an educational purpose were allowed, and worship music that didn't have a sinful beat was okay. A few months after I turned 13, I heard a John Denver song through a chance encounter. "Take Me Home, Country Roads" awoke emotions in me that I hadn't experienced before. I felt an intense, beauty in the world that John Denver described. My father preached doom and gloom, but I just wanted to listen to more music and maybe kiss a girl for the first time. I snuck off to my bedroom, put on a broken set of headphones, and used music to find hope. Dad caught me eventually, and I was punished. It wasn't the first or the last time he'd beat me, but me and my broken nose didn't stop listening to John Denver. I just never let him catch me again. Now, according to my father, the world was always ending soon. I would have to shoot people in self-defense any day now. But I didn't want to hurt anyone. I was terrified and powerless. I started harming myself as a coping mechanism. I was meticulous to avoid areas where anyone could see, but my mom eventually caught me. I had fallen off my bike and ripped my shirt. I tried to pass it off as scrapes from the accident, but she could tell it wasn't from that. I was terrified of being punished by my dad again. But somehow, my mom understood what was happening. Within a week, she filed for divorce. Leaving my dad didn't magically solve all my problems. I had no social skills and had a rough introduction to high school. On an emotional level, I still believed the world was going to end. I wanted to enjoy life before that happened, and I got in a ton of trouble because I didn't care about the future. And then, right out of high school, I had my first son. For the first time in my life, I had something to care about besides myself. I settled into a fairly normal parental routine, and it took me years to undo the damage of my father and understand who I am. My father is incredibly intelligent and hardworking, and I can see little pieces of his personality in myself. But at some point, he made a bad decision, and it led him to where he is now. My father hasn't changed his opinions, but he's much less vocal than he used to be since most of his friends went to prison. I still see him sometimes, but I've created firm boundaries around when and how that happens. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I am goddamn sure my children will feel loved while we figure it out.